Welcome to the Strategic Project Leader, where we help you leverage strategic project management so you can achieve your goals. Now, here's your host, Fola Alabi.
Good morning and welcome to another great episode on the Strategic Project Leader. How's everyone doing today? It's a great day because every time I get a chance to help you elevate your career, your business, and your life, leveraging strategic leadership and project management skills, it lights up my world. In today's episode, your host, Paul Alabi, will help him navigate the muddy waters when we think about strategic projects. We're going to be talking about mega projects. How can we avoid failures? How can we become the leaders who are equipped to deliver projects that accelerate value for organizations? Let me know first where you're actually joining us from, because I am joining you all the way from Calgary, Alberta. I can already see Edgar right there. He's joining us from Mexico. Thanks for being here. And without any doubt, please share this and let your connections know that we are already live. Sorry for the delay that we couldn't come on live earlier on. But believe it or not, it was definitely worth the wait. Let me tell you about the leader who I'm actually bringing on stage today. It's actually a privilege that I have been able to get his time to be here, despite everything and the hiccups that happened along the way. The fact that I have this leader, oh goodness, we talk about strategic projects, mega projects, we talk about IT, we talk about catastrophic failures that has happened in the past. I have got the right person who can help us elevate and talk about this. First off, he is a fellow in management practice at the University of Oxford State University. It's actually great because I remember when I had to go to Oxford University for a while to get a certificate, and it was a trip that I enjoyed and it revealed so much because I got to hear from great leaders just like Alex. He has actually done a lot of research around the comparative challenges of managing projects across different sectors in IT, construction, energy, defense, transformation. His research is actually key and has helped transform the trajectory of so many projects all around the world. He teaches program and change management. He works around risk as well. And he's one that he's passionate about making lasting change across the world. Can you please join me as I bring on stage Dr. Alexander? Dr. Alexander, how are you doing this morning?
I'm very well. How are you, Fola? And, good
Great.
afternoon from my side of the pond.
That's right. Where are you joining us from? Tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world today.
I'm in Oxford, and it's getting very autumnal here. I think we have reached about 5 degrees and was really frosty this morning. Everything was nicely covered with white stuff. So it's getting the time of the year.
I know. You talk about the white stuff. We get the snow even in September here, so we cannot complain.
True that.
Yeah.
It's winter here when the rain gets a little bit colder than usual.
Definitely. I know I've been there, so I just can only imagine. But yes, we know we've got just a little bit of your time and we want to dive into strategic projects. But first off, when we think about strategic or mega projects, what exactly does that mean?
Well, that's actually a really good question because last week I was, for instance, talking with a colleague of mine about a research paper we were going to write, and we wanted to look into the difference between program and projects because people give it always kind of interesting labels, and it's not really clear what that means. So I mean, sort of when we're talking about what is a project, and then we started to talk about this, and that there's some strategic projects, and what we mean by that is really sort of because, there's always that big discussion, or there used to be a lengthy discussion about what is a project, what's a program, what's a portfolio. And then you say, well, portfolio is if you have sort of things that are like packages with interdependencies, and then and you call these packages projects, and then you have a portfolio. But then you look at some of the big projects and you see, no, there's also packages within the dependencies, and they're kind of managed like what you would do in a portfolio management office. So what's really the difference? So So we were really thinking about that and sort of, what shall we call these things? And and then there's the language around sort of the mega things, which kind of speaks to the size. And a lot of my colleagues, including Ben Flubier, on record and of saying a mega project is everything above $1 billion. And as you just said, and I've done a lot of research in IT. In IT, there have been only a handful of projects that were ever more expensive than $1 billion US. That is just a very different size and of scale in IT. So it's really hard to do these. So we started using the term strategic projects because they are strategically important. So you have an idea, say a CEO or somebody else has an idea, and that typically then needs to jump out of the PowerPoint slide or lift off the page of the report and be put into practice. And that's often done as a project. And sort of, even if it's not initiated by the strategy, other projects can also be really strategically important. Right? Surviving a crisis is a very interesting project that is strategically important. Launching a new product might be very strategically important. So for us, it's kind of, we use that to talk about, sort of where is a project? What are the projects that are making a strategic contribution to the organization, the company that is initiating them?
That is a very, very good one in clarifying that, because at the end of the day, it's absolutely critical that there is strategic alignment when we're delivering any project or any initiative at all. It has to create some form of value that either ties back to maybe ROI or probably social license or whatever that is, but it's critical that there's a strategic alignment. And so trying to like get away from that mega projects kind of thing, putting a dollar amount to it, it's about how can we deliver projects that add strategic value to our organization. And now let's take it further. So when we then take it, we think about PM who's brought in, on board to say we have a key initiative and you want to deliver this. How critical is it to ensure that you go back to understand that strategic connection back to organizations' goals and objectives? I remember our initial conversation when we're talking about even legacy projects, right? How can project managers pretty much elevate their projects, maybe when they haven't really got maybe the right skills or they really don't understand? You're just like, I'm just here to deliver this piece of work, and that's kind of what I need to focus on. How critical is it for them to come back and get aligned back to that strategic objective?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the most important. I think it should be always the first step. I mean, there's a lot of things a project manager can do, right? And there's also a little bit of that myth, if you not to be too critical here, but I did my PMP like 20 years ago or something like that, and back then. The world of projects started with a project initiation document. This whole idea is then, oh, congratulations, you're a project manager now. Here's your project initiation document. If you deliver what's in there, you can be happy. Should anything change, we will send you an email, kind of thing, right? And, I've never been on a project where that actually was the case, right? I've never been on a project where really the goals were clear, or the objectives were clear. It was typically starting in that kind of foggy environment where you have to work with the stakeholders. And I think as a first step, sitting back and saying, so why do you want me to do this? Why is this important, right? What is this going to do? I think that's that's a good starting point of a conversation. If you end up working very much in the front end or in the very initiation phase of a project kind of thing. And I think that's sort of that is the first thing, to really understand what whoever is initiating the project is meaning by it and wanting to get it out, right? And then the other thing is that we have been thinking about is sort of how should we measure the performance of projects. Right, so there's a lot of things, and there's the iron triangle, the cost, time, quality idea, and it's if you, like me, sort of read sometimes academic journals, and if you it's in the project management journals, it is still the most cited article ever. on the iron triangle. And even in the first article, cost, time, quality / scope, even there was maybe we should also add customer satisfaction and stakeholder views and so on. So it was kind of like, I think the title of the article was 3 certainties and 2 best guesses of what the objectives of a project should be. So there's always been this kind of thing. And but then if we are thinking, and you said it's right, probably there should be some consideration of an ROI or some other kind of, measurement, even if it's qualitative, of value creation. There's a target. Let's try to achieve as much as possible of that. So, and that is sort of, and when then we're thinking about this, sort of, okay, so if we unpack that a little bit, and that's what we came up with, and we call this kind of the 5 gaps of it. There's a kind of the iron triangle. What is the scope you have delivered? How much money have you spent on this? How much time have you taken to do so? What's the quality of that? That's kind of stuff we can measure while we're going on in a project. So it's kind of a thing that in any good project these days you measure on a daily basis. And on a daily basis, where are we with our budget? Have you gained or have we lost schedule? Right. Then you have the next layer down, which is then, you can measure the interim outputs, but ultimately the only, the final scope has ever been built, you can only do at the end of the project. So that's sort of the next level up that we can establish that. And then the next one, so that's the outputs, the deliverables. Then you have the outcomes, which are the benefits and the realization of the benefits. And that typically takes some time after the project. And that's also, who's doing that? That's often where this thing's starting to fall over. And then you have the benefits, cashable, non-cashable benefits for the organization. And then you even also have a legacy that you're leaving behind in a project. And so that's probably something that comes to fruition even further long-term after the project. So I think isn't that sort of in the kind of the ideas where we are thinking. So somebody just said there on LinkedIn about saying we need that alignment between what's the purpose, what do all the different stakeholders, and make no mistake, they're probably not aligned themselves either, but that's a conversation to get to some sort of shared understanding. And then, well, how do we align the project purpose against that, so that as a leader, I can talk authoritatively about that, and then and then how can we make that measurable? So how we can then translate the greater purpose into objectives and start thinking about those and starting to measure things in terms of demonstrating our performance on these projects.
That's right. I think it's critical that as project professionals, even as business leaders, strategic alignment is absolutely critical. Because I know some people say there's some projects you do that may not really deliver strategic benefits. My challenge is, if it doesn't deliver strategic outcomes, why do it in the first place? And so, as a project manager who definitely wants to elevate and become a strategic project leader, you need to be able to question those things. Yes, I know I've got my prioritization document. Now this is my chatter. However, how does this add value when I leave this project at the end of it? Those key performance indicators, what are they going to show, and how has it helped move the needle for the organization? I think that's a foundation that we definitely have to set. And thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for actually setting that scene. I want us to walk us through. I know you've got a wealth of experience. You've seen different projects, you've seen failures. But our key here is, we have got hopefully now strategic alignment. And the PM is going through this project. What are the steps do they need to take to ensure that they avoid failures? I know you are a champion for a lot of the front end work. What should PMs be doing to ensure that they are set up for success?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, right? And I think it's always, projects always start at the beginning. Even if we're thinking about sort of the end, the right sort of the right side of the gun chart earlier, right? What would you want to achieve? But ultimately, they all start at the beginning. And so the way we see it, and that's sort of, I think that was when I started on this journey, and we started all the research, and I left industry where I worked on turning around all these failed projects and looking into some of the front-end planning, particularly of large IT projects. That was my job back then. And I always thought, listen, we need to do better with this. We're planning to spend 200, 500 million US dollars on an IT system here. And the level of detail and understanding of that wasn't great. And then I met these people that I then joined in the research group here at the University of Oxford, who had some very interesting ideas about us and how can we increase the accuracy of the front end of the planning. And the idea was simple. If you start your project from the wrong position, so if you say it's going to cost 10 million, but it's absolutely unrealistic because you were very overly ambitious or too hopeful, too optimistic about, some good prices you will get from, the supply chain, whatsoever. If you start with the wrong foot, it guarantees failure. Setting project up for success doesn't guarantee success, on the other hand, either. So, but it's the best we can do. And I think it's not sort of really our focus and what we're thinking about is, we need to get that starting point right. If we're starting off with a bad decision, only failure can follow. A good decision doesn't guarantee success, but it at least avoids the failure of the project. So I think that's sort of the starting position. So really nailing the front end of the project. So getting the strategic aspiration right, getting the objectives right, as we just talked about, but also getting the budget right, getting the schedule right, getting the scope nailed down. So that is absolutely kind of the must-have scope. And there's a good understanding of what that is. And then I think those are, and procurement, of course, getting the right partner on board that you want to deliver with. I think those are absolutely fundamental things. If any of these things don't quite work out, if you suddenly end up with not a good or an unrealistic schedule, that's what I mean by not a good schedule, or an unrealistic budget, you will always have an overrun. It's very likely that you will end up in trouble after all. If you fail to get good, well-performing partners integrated in the project, you will struggle. It's one of the biggest reasons why these things happen. So that's kind of really the ideas in the front end about this and what are some of the crucial elements. And you can think about other things as well, sort of that support this, which is around, and how do we create the governance structure of the project? So how do we make decisions? Typically, you do also a lot in terms of risk management, but that is really mostly there to inform your schedule and your cost estimates. You come up with things like an integration strategy if you have a big complex project where lots of little things have to come together. But that is, again, sort of in that, typically driven through the detailing of your schedule, getting down to level 3, level 4, level 5 as early as possible. So to really understand those things. But I think these are really the big things up front that we need to think about. And get the budget right, get the schedule right. Get that strategic alignment right, and then enable that by a good supply chain that we need to have on board and get the scope of the project nailed down. And then we do actually see that projects are successful. As you said, yes, we studied failure a lot. And I was just talking last week to my colleagues who do a lot of who keep the data in our team. And we've looked at about 20,000 projects and all across the globe. And somebody was asking me last week as well, as in sort of how, some of that data goes back before 1900, not a lot, but about like 10 projects or so. And so we studied these 20,000 projects, and what we see is that about, if you don't look at any sectors, just any project across all sectors where those happen, about half of them were on budget, and about 1 in 8 were on budget and on schedule. And then if you ask the question, how many were not only on budget, but also on schedule and on benefits or better, then it's 1 in 200 projects. So that's a very low number. But, we do see these successes, and we do see that successful projects are really those ones that are really starting well. It's too hard to try to deliver a project and fix a wrong starting position. That's almost unfortunately, a guarantee for the absence of success.
It's always easier to to get things right when we get it right from the beginning. However, as you know, not everything ever goes to plan. They say whatever can go wrong kind of always goes wrong. And when we take a typical project, maybe a major transformation where the PM has sat, oh, we've got our stakeholders in place now. We're gonna get into project life. So, hello, babies, how are you? Where we actually, you know, take the ideas of our projects, you know, we get strategic alignment. PMs have got their scopes kind of nailed down and agreed. We've got a budget, we've got things. What else are the things that you have found as well that have actually caused failures? Because things change. And if we come back into this agile way of doing work where the scope is never fully finalized, what exactly can project managers actually do to arm themselves to ensure that that issue around scope creep never becomes a major issue? Because when I also go through the journals and I look and I review a lot of the reasons for project failures, you find out that scope at times is always a major issue because maybe the budget numbers have actually gone over because they now have to recreate something else that's different, or there's been a shift in what the business really thought they wanted at that particular point. Are we gonna totally categorize that piece as failure? You know what I mean? Because Alex, if at the start of it we were looking at maybe just a significant change was okay, but the scope has now shifted and now the budget obviously has now totally gone way over. Can you maybe just run us through an example of where you've experienced that or where you've seen an organization actually had that challenge? And how are they able to bring things backwards to get it back on track?
I mean, you can see that all over the world. I mean, most of the projects, right? And I always think it's, and that's why, even when we are talking in our research about success and failure of projects, and well, actually, I wanted to say the other way around, because in our research we're talking about cost overruns and schedule delays and benefit shortfalls of projects, but neither of those actually mean that a project was a failure or unsuccessful. Right? Just because it cost a little more, that doesn't necessarily mean there was a failure in the project. And same thing, just because they delivered on budget doesn't mean it was necessarily a success. So I think there's the thing is really complicated, and typically, particularly when we're talking about strategic projects, everybody would always say there was an element of success, there was an element of failure in every single project, right? Something could have gone better, something could have, something went really, really well. Even if everybody else agreed at the end of it, let's not do that again. So I think it's in sort of the clearest measure of a of project failure that one can think of is probably if a project gets cancelled and terminated. And that is probably everybody, I think we can all agree, if the project is like halfway through, we're just going to stop this. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to write it off. We're going to come clean. If we're in the public sector and announce this, then, I think we can all agree that that was probably a failure. And so everything else, probably different shades of success. And so, and I think that's really kind of the first thing. So, and then you say, well, yeah, exactly, and how we are actually going to evaluate whether the project was successful or not, right? And how would you even say that if at the beginning of the project, things are unclear, whether the scope is not there? How can we then actually starting to think about, and have you delivered the scope at the end of the project? And you're saying, well, I wasn't clear at the beginning, so I don't know. So yes, so I think and that also speaks to this whole thing about that achieving that strategic alignment, thinking about the purpose of the projects, taking that purpose and translating that into scope and into the benefits of side of things, quantifying it, and then translating those kind of the user requirements to scope into a delivery methodology and into estimates, etc. All that process, right? That needs to be done and done over again. And, if anybody here, if you work in, I forgot what the latest statistic is, but I think the last time I checked, the average tenure of a CEO in the S&P 1000 was 4 years something. So if you have a project that runs for 2 years, statistically, there's a 50-50 chance that you will get a new CEO. Right. And with the new CEO come new strategic priorities, come, lots of different change, right? This should come to no surprise to us that, these things, particularly when we're talking about multi-year projects, and 2 years for a strategic project might sound even very, very short. We're talking 3, 4, 5, 6 year long projects. Change is inevitable in these things.
Yes. And that kind of leads me to a very, very good question. You just spoke about changes that are happening, when there is a new change in leadership. Because I've got, different schools of thought that come and say PMs are just there to deliver projects. But I believe that there is a benefit in having the project management discipline as part of that C-suite conversation or having a seat at the table when it comes to, talking about strategic outcomes, talking about, the direction of the organization, so that they can actually influence these decisions from the new CEO, from the new CFOs that are, being put there in place, rather than the project management discipline coming kind of like at the middle piece of it. Do you see any benefit where project management kind of sits at that strategic level?
So yeah, absolutely, and the that's why we're talking about strategic projects here, right? And we're coming obviously, and if I look at the comments here, mostly from the project management profession. If you go the other way around, if you look into what my colleagues here at Oxford and elsewhere are researching, who sit in the strategy department, then they have this term, which is the strategy execution gap. So the strategy academics and researchers that look into how strategy is done, how people strategize, right, and think about what makes a good strategic outcome, how do people develop a good strategy, they then typically stop their thinking about it and, okay, we've got the strategy now, our job is done. And they turn around and say, you go. Right? And there's a massive gap between coming up with a great strategy and then implementing or executing it brilliantly. And we can see this, and I think I do seem to remember this a couple of years back, there was a McKinsey quarterly article that beautifully showed the perennial optimism and hockey stick strategic forecasting curves, where CEOs would say, well, it's going to stagnate or going to be a little bit worse than it currently is for a while, but we're already pulling it around. And you see that, and they charted it, and it just looks like a slowly declining promised hockey stick after hockey stick after hockey stick, and never really materializes, right? And that is because, the greatest strategy, who cares? It needs to be executed. And therefore, and when we're developing strategy, can we actually deliver this? Is such an important question to bring really forward into that kind of conversation. And I think, so my personal experience is, particularly when we're engaging with senior leaders in big organizations in the public and the private sector, is actually getting to that C-suite and talking with the executives of the organization about this. And, you might have all sorts of great ideas, and great ideas 3 times a day. You need to really understand things like, what's the bandwidth of your organization, right? Where are the constraints in turning great strategy into projects and executing them very well? And, how do you know that that is actually happening? How can you track this? Do you get the insights? And so I've seen some I've recently started to really look into a big Canadian project in the energy space. There, the board gets the daily updates on the productivity of that project, daily measures, every single day. The board is so interested because it's their strategic project. The board pays attention, right? And that actually helps a lot. It's the right thing to do, and and probably many of us, if I think back about the projects I've managed, I wish that had been the case. And,
Yes.
because then you have suddenly the firepower to deal with a lot of politics or deal with a lot of uncertainties or delays in decision making somewhere else in the organization. And so it's a really, it's a great position to be in. But then also we see is that projects actually successful. Projects are lower risk. They have fewer overruns. They have fewer delays. And so these things matter. And so yes. So I mean, the short answer is, of course, projects should be, at least the big strategic projects should be part of the C-suite conversation. Now, in the reality, they're
Yeah.
often not. So what can we do about it? It's a very
Yes.
important question. What can we do about it as project
That
leaders
was
as
my
well?
next question, right? Because the reality is that we don't always see that. So how can we make that the new normal? So we can pretty much increase the success rates of actually achieving our strategic objectives. Is actually achieving strategy, right? So what can we do about it?
And I think there's two things. One thing is that project management or sort of the project work is often quite invisible. And I find it always fascinating. As we did a recent calculation that we're currently submitting to a journal, and there is some studies out there that we use in our bit of research that shows that sort of roughly roundabout 40% of all work done in a society like in the US or in Western Europe is organized as projects, 40%. So all the hours, the millions, trillions of hours worked every year in our countries, about little less than half is organized, is spent working on projects. And I think this has always fascinated me that it's such a common way of organizing work,
Getting
but
on.
yet we don't really understand what we're doing in some things, right? Our understanding and our thinking, and I mean, big projects, strategic projects have existed for a while, since the 1950s, 1960s. We have been starting to really think about it as its own discipline. And so yeah, sort of that was 60 years ago, but it's only 60 years ago on the other hand. And so yeah, how we, sort of, I think it's always interesting as in sort of we haven't really come to a good understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing this. And that's one thing. So I said this, and why is it not part of the C-suite? Because it's so invisible. And I think some project management still doesn't really have that kind of recognition that, say, other things have. When we're talking about things, a lot of work is organized in that way. It's just not spoken enough about. I think there's a little bit of that visibility, right? If a CEO actually knew how many projects were going on in their organization, because often they don't, they would be very surprised. And if they then say, okay, how many of these people are trained in this kind of project delivery? How much is the organization investing into project specific trainings? All of those things. It's really difficult. So then suddenly, maybe, and that's what we've seen, is in some kind of awareness is growing that this is of strategic importance to the organization. So I've seen organizations like that. I've seen organizations that almost went bankrupt because projects failed. And we all know project organizations, companies that actually have gone bankrupt because their projects failed. That happens quite frequently. In construction, it happens almost every single day. And multiple times every single day if you take a global perspective. And in IT is a little less frequent, but still there. So, and typically, if senior leadership has had that experience, they're very attuned into this kind of effect. And the other elements of it is, since sort of when we're talking about is sort of the unreformed characters in the C-suite, it is often about that kind of, a little bit is our job is always, of course, to educate and to share sort of some why this is important, why we think this is important. So we've seen really interesting things. So for many, many years here at Oxford, we've been working with the British government, and the UK government has probably almost 15 years ago, probably even longer, almost 20 years ago, started to go on this journey of recognizing in cross-government that project delivery is a profession and should have the same prestige and standing and also career path like development of government policy. And it should not just be sort of the thing people do in their spare time or in their weekends after they've written a brilliant piece of policy or some really good analysis and stuff like that. No, it is something that's of strategic importance. And elevating it and putting it in there was not necessarily kind of really the idea of that senior leadership of elected politicians and so on. It came through by enough project leaders across government banding together, creating a critical mass and starting to talk about it and creating that kind of stakeholder network, starting to create a movement around this with visibility, and then sort of pushing it from there on. And I think what I find in that is a really inspiring stories because, we as people who work in all sorts of organizations, we typically have some part of ownership over the system, right? We're not the victims of the system, if we don't like how our seniors running these projects, typically we can change that. Might not be easy, might be very rewarding to change it, particularly if you don't like working in that kind of environment, but we can do it. And I think that's always the first step to realize it. And then, we've seen it over and over again, even if project management sits somewhere sort of in the middle management layer strata of the organization. If enough of those come together, things can change and can change for the better.
That's all about becoming catalysts of change. Change will only happen when we have a lot of people talking about the same thing beyond just looking at yourself as PMs. I'm just there to deliver this particular task. It's always so invincible. And they just seem to be temporary resources that kind of come in, and once that piece is done, everyone walks away. In elevating that, I see there's a lot of work that definitely needs to be done, working with the PMs, working with, senior leaders, business leaders, as well as executive C-suite leaders, as well as to what project management truly is, how critical it is to ensure that strategy can actually be executed and anything can actually be achieved. Because without projects, really, what are we talking about? It's just going to be like nice offsite meetings where they go and talk about this in fancy hotels. And then they come back and say, yes, guess what? We're going to increase, awry, we're going to create new venture capitals. We're going to do all of this. But it's never going to happen without our unsung heroes, our project leaders who are going to take all of that and create something tangible out of that. Because I really want, for those who actually listen, let us know if you've got any questions, put that in the comment before we go further. This is a piece that I'm so passionate
I know, and I know, and a colleague of mine, a strategy professor, I really love and work with him because he talks about strategic alignment, right? He always talks about this, and of all the companies that have said they want to grow revenue and margin, 1% have succeeded. Right? And it's just the sheer number of, so everybody has these lofty ideas and goes on these offsites, as you just said, but without then translating that into aligned, supported projects, it doesn't happen, right? Change doesn't happen without a project. New products don't happen. Nothing happens. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm so excited. I'm actually so pumped because I am writing even another article about project managers becoming strategy drivers. Because without project professionals, nothing really happens. And I think the question I really have for you is really, what can we start doing today? We know there's an element where we need to get the C-suites aligned to what project management truly is and the value, getting that visibility, and that work has to happen. For the food soldiers who are definitely not working the project, they're like, guess what? I'm just one person. What can they start doing today to start elevating the work and the value that they create so we can start this movement?
I think that's sort of my thinking around this is, which I find a very interesting, I picked that up because I started to observe projects talk about their legacy. And so here in the UK, it was the London Olympics, the 2012 legacy, and it was about lessons learned. So they basically wrote mostly shiny marketing materials about what is our lessons learned. But since then, and this is why I think it's really interesting, it has evolved. And a lot of projects here in the UK talk about their legacy. And I think that's a really interesting concept that works on the project level as well as on the individual level of anybody who's involved. So asking the question of what's the legacy we want to leave behind? And by legacy, that doesn't mean, well, it's sort of, you can think about the legacy, about the strategic contribution. But I found it very interesting that, so London 2012 started off with the learning legacy of saying, here's a whole bunch of lessons learned, and hopefully that will make the delivery of the next edition of the Olympic Games easier. I didn't quite work out. The lessons learned were not great either. It was just marketing fluff in most cases. They didn't really honestly talk about what worked, what didn't work, etc., etc. So there was a lot of gaps in there. Subsequent projects have tried to improve that. Same thing as in sort of here in the UK, I found very inspiring. Thames Tideway is a very large sewerage project that's currently going on in London. And what they have done is they, as a project, have identified that we don't have enough tunnel engineers in the UK to satisfy the demand for tunneling engineers. So they have, together with other projects, other big mega projects in the UK, invested in a tunneling college that trains everything from apprentice level to sort of graduate engineer to specialize in the work that goes on in tunneling. Initially, the project has been delayed now, but initially, they would not have really benefited from it. They would have closed out their tunneling program before the first apprentice, after 3 years of apprenticeship, the first graduate engineer who gone through specialization actually would come out of the program. They would have been 80-90% complete with their tunneling program. So they did it because they wanted to invest in the profession, in this case, engineering. Right? So I think it's a very, we can ask them the same question in projects. If we're doing this project, what is the legacy we leave behind for other strategic projects that would follow in the organization? And then if we're asking that kind of, and you can ask the same question sort of also on the personal level, right? Me working as a project leader, right? What is the legacy I want to leave behind? And what do I want to make, change for project leaders of the future? The strategic projects leaders of the future. What is that impact I want to make? And I think, so in us talking about these things, that is, for instance, a strategic contribution that goes into this kind of, direction, asking about questions, or starting to think about things that really have nothing to do with the immediate, cost-effective, on-time delivery of the maximum benefits of our current projects, right? We are starting to think about project management, thinking about how can we make it better, and so on. And I think that is sort of the first step. And then once you start building out that movement and talking about other people around this, then it starts to really, get its own trajectory. And I think that's a sort of, you can do it on your own, great, but it's really once we're starting to make these connections, then it starts to to come to fruition. That's why I think it's, getting these kind of, network and talk about it, but with a purpose. I think always with a purpose, isn't it? With the purpose of trying to make things better. That's such an important aspect.
That was a perfect segue for Project Lifestyle. We're going to get back to Dr. Alexander. So much to unpack. But in this segment, we definitely want to just tie in all of this to a lifestyle. Dr. Alex has actually challenged me, and I read a lot of his work and I admire him so much. And I think about how can we really make this sustained? How can we create the momentum to keep going? So for the Project Lifestyle segment today, I want to challenge you around what exactly do you need to do that can help create more visibility around the value you create, probably at work and even at home. And I want to use the word legacy, as he has said, as an acronym for what I want to drop with you today. When you think about accelerating value and creating something that is going to actually pretty much outlive you, I think the first thing is to leverage clear objectives. That's the L for me. What exactly are we looking to do? What does that truly mean? What's the outcome? It is something that may not create financial benefits now, but it may help us create like better leaders and improve our capabilities. But we have to be crystal clear as to what the objectives are that we create as project managers, as business leaders on a daily basis. Think about that and go back and say, is this project, is it really clear? The E there is about engage stakeholders actively. We talked about C-suite executives. We talked about the project teams, even the operations people who you're going to be handing this over to. How engaged are they? Do they really understand the why behind the project? Or is it just another piece where, yes, we have to do this and it has to be delivered on time, on budget, on the schedule? Is that what it truly is? But do they really know why? Do they get newsletters? Do they do have maybe like town halls? Make this thing fun. Make them get excited about what you bring, what you create. That's the E. The G for me is about generating compelling information, communication materials, because engagement is absolutely critical. And I heard someone say many years ago that you could have the best of ideas, but if you cannot communicate it clearly, no one is ever going to get it. We need to be able to generate compelling communication materials. We need to be able to like coalesce together as teams, get the organization excited about the project, this initiative. And then the A, which I guess is absolutely critical, Dr. Alex has mentioned that over and over, is about getting aligned to organization priorities. Strategic alignment is absolutely critical in everything you do. If you haven't got that key piece that ties back to a strategic component of where the organization is actually going, then you may scream so loud, but no one is actually ever going to hear you. The C there for me is about celebrating milestones and achievements. So with all of this, yes, even those quick wins, make it big, Let your team know that we've done this. Get some things on the hallways and in the workplace, even when you're at home. Let people know that guess what? We hit that milestone. We're just a little bit closer to achieving that goal and objective. So that way, your stakeholders are also more engaged and they understand what's actually going on. And then the why there for me is about the yield, regular measurements. Because people say you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Some people say, you need to know where you're going so that way you can keep checking and refining, being more agile to check where have we gone so far? What are those key performance indicators, the KPIs, how you measure consistently? Dr. Alex had just mentioned about where a C-suite executive level, they get daily updates on that particular project. They want to know what's gone really well. What can we definitely adjust? Because for you to become that key strategic driver, it takes you building legacy. I love this so much. Legacy. What's going to outlive you? What you're creating. We want to make it more tangible beyond just what's written on paper. How can we translate this and make this a reality? Dr. Alex, what do you think about that? Because it's all about this whole strategic, you know, project we're trying to elevate. You want to say something? Over to you.
No, 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 no. I think that was brilliant. That was very good, and I like that. Although I already forgot what G was for. Uh, I definitely had to follow.
Generate compelling communication materials. That's the
I
generate.
know, I know. It said at the beginning, "Is grab a notebook and a pen," and I got the pen and the notebook. I didn't write this down, so I'm sure. Hopefully, somebody will post that in the chat, so
Yeah,
that we always have a
that's,
record of this.
that's a good one. I love that. I remember from our first conversation that we spoke about legacy. Everything we do should actually be something that creates outcomes, right? Something that will definitely outlive us. I did a post as well a couple of days ago where I said projects may be kind of seem to be temporary, but they create permanent outcomes. And the same way, the project managers who are the ones driving this are also permanent resources because they understand the why behind. They can also help us ensure that we achieve the benefits and realize them as well. They need to be part of the conversations at the front end where they actually connected to say, yes, we want to, increase ROI, but are we sure we can do it based on our resources, based on even how we connect to the overall portfolio? It may not be likely. We may have to change our budgets or change direction. But being part of these key conversations, making project professionals become strategy drivers, it's absolutely critical. Let's see if we can go to our questions and answers. So just
Let's do that.
Okay. I know Dr. Alex is already pumped. What has been a key challenge that you have faced in your career and how have you overcome it?
Key challenge I had to face in my career. Oh gosh. We have not practiced these questions before, so this obviously obvious. I think the first time I had to kill my own project, That
Mm.
was quite a challenging thing, and I was surprised how long it took to do. I was there to lay the groundwork to create a shared service center between multiple different countries, and it was going nowhere because of cultural differences and all of those things. And I thought, listen, I'll just tell the board of that particular company that this is not going to happen. We can't see any way in this can be ever a success. And it took about 3 months to kill this thing. So it was really, really difficult. And that's also one of my very interesting insights that, if everybody in the project who was working on that in the team size and is going nowhere, there's no benefits associated. This is just a waste of money. So, nobody wants to work on this. Can we just go and kill it? It took forever to do it. It felt like forever. So that was a very interesting challenge, I think, in that. And the other one, I think that, if you say it's in real big challenges, I think that's actually not a work-related challenge, but that is constantly maintaining a work-life balance. I think that is such an important challenge. And, well, you see my daughter earlier, so we negotiate that on a weekly basis. So, but, so I can't say as now I have the perfect answer to that. But particular in our world, we're working on things and sometimes with great urgency. That is one of the most important and I think most challenging tasks we have to look after for ourselves.
I know, because when we want to create legacy, we want to be sure that we are also sane and we are mentally equipped, right? You don't want to overwork yourself and get burnt out because we need the
Exactly.
for a very long time. There's so much questions to actually go through. So thank you so much for that. Now the question is, we've already mentioned how critical it is to get that C-suite level buy-in. What exactly are the tangible steps that our listeners can go away with right now to start pushing that momentum to get C-suite to start connecting to project management overall? What can they do? What steps can they take right now?
I've seen some really inspiring examples. And this is people saying I'm not going to do this job for you unless, kind of an answer of the yes, but question. So I spoke to the team that built the Madrid Metro, hugely strategic project. And the president of the Madrid Metro, who also sort of the chairman of the project, had this agreement and saying, yes, I will take over and run this project for you. But dear mayor of the city, if we have a problem, I want to get your private telephone number. I will phone you up and you have to promise me that we will have a board decision, basically is the highest, most senior decision we can make within 24 hours. And this was a 15-year program of work. So, 24 hours counts. And that was his condition to take on this project.
Okay.
And I've met another one who works, another project leader. And he, again, a guy, for no particular reason, he worked mostly in the private sector. And you always had this thing as in that he, whenever he took on a job, would talk to a stakeholder and say, okay, I'm going to do this. Fair enough. But if I ask for help, you have to help me. And if I don't ask for help, do not help me. So that was his mantra. So whenever somebody, and if people wouldn't agree to that, he would actually walk away from this thing. And he said, the world is big enough. And there's other people, I'm not particularly wedded. He wasn't the most loyal person to an organization. He was a project delivery person. He liked delivering projects. He didn't really much care what it was. So, but, and that's really exciting, I think. And sort of, that's the one thing, right? We need to learn how to say no. As once a psychologist once told me that I'm work with to work with C-suite executives in the boardroom and those kind of things. She always said this, and well, if you have some C-suite member that doesn't quite listen or does things, just think of themselves as teenagers. You can't directly say no to it. They will get a hissy fit. So you have to say yes, but in all sorts of different ways. So it is like talking to teenagers. So I know it's tough, right? But that's a stepping stone. And then, of course, that idea of, and we need to network. So if you're an organization, if you're lonely and you feel that you're the only person fighting against the system, I'm sure there will be others in the same position that will do that. So find those connections and start just, almost like the other element of the group therapy, start talking about what's challenging and seeing as we can start making slowly changes. And as you just said, right, celebrate early successes. It doesn't need to be massive. Nobody ever changed overnight. No organization ever changed overnight. That takes years. It's the small steps in the right direction.
That's right. I love it. Group therapy. We're going to be starting some groups for project managers and get some momentum going. I love this next question. Is one that really is actually nice and dear. I said I was going to get to this. He was just talking about, would we take like a strategic project to leverage as a springboard for having the PMO at the table? And I'm just going to take a little bit of a stab at that before I throw that to you, Alex. For instance, I believe that I never like seeing project management offices as PMOs. I want them to become more of strategy realization offices, because just as Dr. Alex has said as well earlier, is positioning is absolutely critical. We spoke about visibility. We want to be able to connect what exactly are we truly doing? Are we just executing? Are we really helping organizations do something even bigger? Because for C-suites and for the organization to start seeing project management differently is going to take a shift in so many ways, where they now see the critical aspects of, from strategy design, that the conversations needs to be heard with the right people as well as part of it to ensure we can truly achieve our strategic goals and objectives. And so the project management office are like at a very, very pivotal position to pretty much elevate to actually take on roles as chief strategy officers. I see that position where, the CSO comes from the project management discipline, where they actually part of, strategy creation, just try the part of prioritizing, just try to put together teams together. And there's that seamless, pull from visibility from strategy design through to benefit realization, because we can then have the full end-to-end process like a overall portfolio and be part of making decisions and helping it come to fruition and also ensuring that we achieve the benefits. What are your take on that, Dr. Alex?
No, I'm with you on this one. And I think that's absolutely right. And there are organizations out there, there are industries out there where if you haven't been in the project delivery profession, you are not going to be in the C-suite. At least not in the chief exec or chief operations or chief technology, maybe in the CFO, obviously. But if you haven't been part of our delivery, then you're not there, right? Think construction companies, think some of the big oil and gas companies, think of the big engineering companies or very engineering driven companies that we all know. It is absolutely, in that profession, you have to be an engineer to end there. And that also means you have to deliver projects. And I think that is something that is really, really interesting. And to your point is in terms of, that might happen at the end of our careers, to be honest, but in the middle bit, we might be working on a project management office. And I think your framing is really interesting, right? What does the project management office actually do, right? Is it just there to shuffle paper and do some administrative task? Is it just a glorified like team assistant kind of thing, right? Obviously, it's a different role, but it's a role that somewhere needs to happen, but ultimately is often it is not the right terminology, it's in what are they doing, right? So and therefore, and I think it's in some organizations I've seen them called mission control, and I also think it's in very closely related to this is, we're talking about project controls or management controls, and the controls function a lot, big projects, but it doesn't control anything. And it's all about creating insights. Why don't we call these things? It's all about project insights. These are the organizations that generate all the management information. Why don't we call them that insights? And I think that's isn't really how are we actually going to yeah, exactly. I'm absolutely with you. So we need to think about this and what is the framing,
Yes.
and also, and back then, what's the purpose? Why do we have a PMO? Can the PMO please explain what its value is? And and then maybe we all find out the PMO isn't the greatest name itself. And I'm forever grateful for all its sins that the agile movement has given us the leeway to start inventing new labels, right? And and
think about it, Alex. When we think about the fact that even in business, about branding. A lot of people argue and say, the PMO, it doesn't really matter what their name's called as long as you're delivering value. But even when you're positioning a business, like how you even introduce yourself, I'm like, who exactly are you? People want to know then what's the purpose of what you're doing. And that's why even for project managers, when I coach them, I say, you never introduce yourself, even as a project manager. You are a strategy driver. You make strategy come to life. And that's absolutely critical. Even position it that way. Like the CEO is going to turn and say, oh, in the elevator. Oh, yeah, I never knew that. I'm like, yes, because without my position, strategy never becomes a reality. You take that invisible idea and you turn it into something tangible. It's critical that the visibility, advocacy starts with each and every one of you actually listening. Doesn't matter if you're an accountant, if you're whatever, as long as your role, whatever the outcome that you're trying to create, how do you position that messaging? I think it's absolutely critical. And that will start getting attention of the people that definitely matter.
Yeah, and I think this is the right thing, right? I always think about that kind of formula, right? It's pie. Success, personal success is pie, right? It's performance, it's impact, and it's exposure, right? So you need to perform in your job. You need to have that impact, and I think that's the thing I find it fascinating because when you're doing big projects or strategic projects, you have real world impact, right? You can actually go and say, I changed today the life of 10,000 school children, right?
Yes.
And
Yes. The legacy.
and it's stuff like that, right? And even if you're doing the most boring thing, saying, I, you know, even if you work, say, for instance, on an IT banking regulation project, you can say this, and I today have worked on making sure that 1 million customers next month still have a bank account, and gazillion pensioners still have their pension safe with us, rather than us losing the banking license. So we can find, and I think that is the impact, and really being clear, performing well, being clear about the impact, and then getting the exposure. So talking about that again, and making those connections through moving together to talking through the C-suite as an individual voice or a unified voice, that kind of things, and right, that creates that exposure. And I think these three elements, success is a pie.
We're going to bake it together.
Totally with you, exactly.
Dr. Alexander, I just want to say thank you so much. It's always fun, talking to you. You've dropped so many, I don't know, ideas, strategies, and wisdom. And I hope everyone listening, you have been able to take away so many things from the inside, how you're going to work, from day to day delivery, how you position. And overall, I think the key thing here is the legacy. Beyond what's in that presentation document, beyond delivery on time, on budget, on schedule, how do you tie that information back to the legacy you're going to be creating? I want to thank Keiko, Cortes. I have Hope. I have Alakunle. I have Kirby. We have people from Mexico, from Qatar, from Syria. Oh my goodness. All the way joining us from New Jersey. We had Canada, we had Nigeria, we had Calgary. The list goes on. I just want to say thank you for being here today. And we've actually had issues where not all the comments are coming through from LinkedIn, but we're gonna put the notes on the replay so you can go in there and see. And I'll be responding to comments as well, and Dr. Alex will be doing that as well. Dr. Alex, what are your final words for us today?
Indeed, it was a great conversation. So anybody who really enjoyed this, to head over, also connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got some more discussions coming up. I'm moderating in the future, so more like panel discussions with some other industry leaders in the UK. So there's lots of announcement on my LinkedIn page. So if you want to connect on that as well. And yes, thank you so much. I think this was a brilliant discussion because we really talked about the things that matter. We talked about that strategic alignments, the legacy, the purpose of projects, and what we've learned from the past. Now we set things up from success by really focusing on those elements up front. It's not about creating a great work breakdown structure on day 2 of a project that will win the battle.
100%. Goodness, I would also have one of my uncles join in as well. Uncle Peter, thank you for being here. Like, I just have so many people in the comments coming in. Thank you so much. It's always a great pleasure. I said that when I actually had to sit in class at Oxford University a couple of years ago, and I took classes on entrepreneurship and innovation. It was really, really great. And thanks for doing it. We have to definitely bring you back because we know there's so much wisdom you have to unpack. Make sure you follow Dr. Alex. He's all about leveraging project management. He does a lot of research, and they are the ones leading the forth when it comes to transformation globally. So you are definitely, you're going to regret if you haven't actually done that yet. So click on the link, connect. A great mind once said that he wants to leave a ding in the universe. I say together, as strategic project leader, we will leave a positive dent in the universe. We all are project managers, but you need to elevate to become strategic project leaders. And what that means is that you step out of the box, out of your comfort zone, and think beyond just the mundane. Because the movement has started, we starting the couple the therapy, but we can create something legacy. Remember, leverage clear objectives. E, engage stakeholder actively. G, generate compelling communication materials. A, align with organizations' priorities. C, celebrate the milestones in your achievement, even the little wins. And the why, yield regular measurements and monitoring. It's been a great pleasure to spend the Saturday with you. And it's lovely. All the way from Oxford, we had Dr. Alexander. I want to thank you. We had the kids even coming to join us as part of this whole thing because project management is a lifestyle. It's beyond just delivering stuff. We need to elevate this and become more visible. I want to say thank you to each and everyone. Connect as well. Let us keep the conversation going. Say when you get a good idea, you share it. So share this and let more people know that it was great to be here today and connect with me as well. Let us continue this great conversation. Have yourself a wonderful Saturday. Same time next week, we're going to be having something fantastic. You do not want to miss this. Thank you once again and have yourself a good one.